Well, as Dan might say, you couldn't make it up. What am I talking about? It's a single justice procedure story, but it's got quite a funny twist. So what's single justice procedure? Done lots of videos on this before, but just to say, this is, it's like a fast track thing for, it's aimed at summary-only offences where imprisonment isn't a possibility. So what you do is, it's things like, road traffic, minor offences, regulatory things like that, no TV licence. But it's very controversial because they write to you and say, okay, this is the system, you are facing prosecution for the offence below, but we are happy to deal with this by way of the single justice procedure. And that is, there's one magistrate, one lay magistrate, sort of not legally qualified. They sit in a room somewhere at a court. In the old days, they used to have a legal advisor available with them to advise on the law. Now they don't. They have access to a telephone helpline. And it's about one legal advisor per 4 magistrates. And the idea is that for a lot of these things, they can plough through it. You might put in a guilty plea. Yes, it's speeding or something like that. I'll take the points and the fine, but it saves me having to come to court. But the thing is, if you don't respond, and say, actually, no, either, yes, I'm happy for you to deal with this, or, actually, no, I want my day in court, or even, I want to plead guilty, but I want to plead guilty in court. I want to be physically present so I can put in some mitigation. Because we've heard all these horror stories about, mitigation has not made its way to the judge. The prosecution haven't passed it on. Sometimes the prosecution themselves haven't even got it. And there's been some really horrible stories about sort of, people at death's door, people with severe disabilities, people taking care of families. I mean, one thing where, somebody died and their family was left, and of course the car, they inherited the car, turned out it didn't have an MOT, so they get fined and they didn't even know about it. And there was that awful case where there was the lass who had no capacity whatsoever. She's being looked after by the local authority. They cancelled her direct debit for the TV licence due to a mistake. She was prosecuted for no TV licence and they put in a guilty plea on her behalf. So she didn't even know about it, but she ended up with a criminal record. So it's all fairly awful. But there's a funny thing now, because guess who's just been convicted? Yes, the Ministry of Justice, the actual department that runs this. How did this occur? Well, apparently they've got a van. And one of their vans was caught or seen speeding. I think it's something like 72 in a 50. So they got the requisite paperwork sent to them saying, please identify the driver of the vehicle, all that sort of thing. It's what we call a Section 172 form. If you've ever been up for anything like motoring offences, you may be familiar with those. And they said, tell us who the driver is. No response. So they sent another letter out saying, oi, we need to deal with this. Tell us who the driver is. Again, no response. So in their absence, they were convicted. So the magistrate said, well, nobody's responded, they haven't said anything, we'll deal with it by way of the single justice procedure. So they imposed £1,000 fine, I think it was £400 costs, and the £80 victim surcharge. Now, obviously, this is quite a funny thing, and there's a really good guy, Tristan Kirk, one of the last of the old school court reporters who actually knows about legal stuff, and he's done a lot of really sterling work, sort of bringing all these injustices to light. I'm not saying this is the biggest injustice in the world, it's more of a funny one. So yeah, so they get prosecuted, and the Evening Standard reach out and say, hey, why, what happened? Why did you end up not responding? And they went, what are you on about? We don't know anything about this. And it transpired that the paperwork had been sent to the wrong address. They'd sent it, instead of sending it to the address of the registered keeper of the vehicle, which is the Ministry of Justice, they would have known about it, they just sent it off to some sort of credit hire company or something, somebody who they'd leased a vehicle from, and they just didn't pass it on. So now, the irony is, they are now appealing. It's not really an appeal, they have done what we call a statutory declaration, where you say, I didn't know anything about this, can it all start again, please? So that's the position it's at now, because that is one thing, if you are done under the single justice procedure, and you didn't know about it, and you can sort of, you can do a statutory declaration, that's where you literally swear. You say, I swear upon, penalty of perjury, etc., that I knew nothing about this. Can you all start again, please? We use stat decks for a few things. You can actually use them just in the regular courts as well, where you're sort of saying, I didn't get the paperwork, I didn't know anything about this. So it's not uncommon. So if that is accepted, and they usually are, then it will start again. Now, I don't know what they'll say about this. I mean, the obvious thing to do is just to throw the driver under the bus, or the minivan, whatever it was, and say, actually, he was driving, give him the fine and the points. Because also, you see, if you don't, respond to this, you don't put any mitigation in. So they just work out the fine by, here's the offence, and we'll just assume you can pay the maximum fine on this because you've not said anything about, financial hardship or anything like this. But in this particular case, then they'll do the stat deck, it'll all start again, they'll respond to the section 172 notice, probably saying, the driver was, at the requisite time, this particular person. I mean, that's interesting because that gets into all sorts of issues about time limits and things like that. And perhaps I should do another video about, because we don't have a statute of limitations in this country generally, but for summary offences, they have to be prosecuted within 6 months of the date of offence. Summary offences are offences that can only be dealt with in the magistrates' court. If it can be dealt with in the Crown Court, either it can only be dealt with in the Crown Court, what we call indictable only, or it can be in the magistrates' court or the Crown Court, depending on what the magistrates say and what the defendant says. That's what we call triable either way. But if it's summary only, it can only be held in the magistrates' court. It's a 6-month time limit, because that's what happened in the kneecap case. I did the video on that, where they needed the consent both of the DPP and the Attorney General for technical reasons, and they didn't actually ask until 5.5 months after the offence, and they got the permission a day late. Interestingly, that is being appealed, but I just don't see how any appeal can succeed, because it's just a strict... it's a very strict test, and it's like if you miss the deadline, you miss the deadline. So I'm not really sure what there is to appeal there, but obviously I'll keep an eye on that one. But I just thought you might find it funny. I mean, to find sort of humorous, because most of the stories about this are absolutely hideously tragic. I mean, if you just look at some of my previous videos, and like I say, it's just people in the worst circumstances in their life, and they just get jumped on. I mean, TV licensing do a lot of this, and it's interesting that the BBC are the only people who are saying there's not a problem here. And they've actually said, well, it should be up to the defendants to keep an eye on this, and they should write, and they should make sure the prosecution have all the right material and the mitigation, and the court should have all the right material, so it's for you to do this. But a lot of the time, people don't even know they're being prosecuted. I mean, that's the major problem with all these sorts of things. But I just thought, that was, something just to take, all the awful news in the world. That one seemed marginally amusing. But like I say, the underlying thing is that this is a seriously flawed system. I mean, don't get me wrong, I can see the benefits of it for people who know about it. It's like, I don't want to take a day off work and go to court. I'm going to get my 3 points on my £85 fine. I'd rather just tick a box and say, that's okay with me. But there you go. So, as always, hope you found that vaguely interesting, vaguely informative, and vaguely accurate, and perhaps slightly amusing. Sorry for the dearth of videos. I've just been so busy with work. Also, it's hideously raining at the moment. I was going to try and shoot this outside, but I had work meetings this morning, and by the time I escaped from them, I just walked out to it being siling it down. But there you go. Hopefully, very soon, I'll be out and about and able to walk and get you some nice scenery. I mean, I'll have to start doing some around all the local stone circles and things, and try and, because there was a really good comment where somebody liked it and compared one of my videos to Paul Whitewick, and I'm a big fan of Paul Whitewick's work because I'm a bit of an archaeology nerd. So that was quite nice. But I like somebody suggested, oh, what's next, Paul Whitewick, like doing legal commentary. Yeah, go for it, Paul. Maybe we should do a joint one about, we could do about coroners and treasure trove. Because that's really interesting, because, what actually is treasure trove? Because it's got quite an interesting technical definition. I'll put that on my list, and I'll try and... Because actually they found the Rillerton Cup down here, didn't they? Maybe I should go up to Rillerton and film it there. And say, yeah, I appear to be just stood in a wet field, but this is a very significant wet field for archaeologists. It's not exactly Indiana Jones, is it?